And welcome back to the Engage A podcast here on a beautiful Saturday morning. Maybe not outside, but the Engage A podcast is back. And we're here to bring the Engage 8 evaluation. Now, you might ask, what is going to be this series, or why are you naming it this series? You didn't give it a name last year. If you're an original follower and have been listening for a while, we thank you. What this is going to be a series about what to expect from these teams going into the 2025 season. Now, is every single prediction going to be accurate? No, there's injuries, there's just me being wrong, and there's also the possibility of me being right. Like Washington last year. I said Washington was going to be a dark horse playoff team. Well, it turns out they were really good and made it to the national championship. But I also said Miami was going to take a step up, and they didn't. So this is going to be just my evaluation after the ending of last year, the winter and spring transfer portal stuff, and then obviously the spring game and who's returning from last year, who's departing, who left in the transfer portal, who went to the NFL draft. All these questions to be answered. And for me, just to give my best analysis on what could you expect from this team, right? And what a better team to start off with than Ohio State. Okay, so let's get into Ohio State. Their recruiting class was good, ranked third overall according to 24/7 Sports, fifth in the composite, and then they had a transfer class ranking of 8. My apologies for mispronouncing or butchering, whatever you want to call it. They got the number 1 overall recruit in the country, Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith's going to be one of those guys where he's got Marvin Harrison Jr. potential in him, possibly even better. I don't know. That might be crazy to some of you guys, but in God, what draft would it be? 2025, 2027 draft, Jeremiah Smith might be the number 1 guy taken. He's already lit it up in spring practices. If you haven't seen some of the highlight catches, he's talked very highly by about everyone in the college football media that has an understanding of who this kid is. A lot of people inside Ohio State talk very highly of this kid. I think Jeremiah Smith's going to be the truth. I really do. He's a really good player. And yeah, that's all I have to say. Aaron Nolan's a very good guy in this recruiting class as well. That's going to be inserted into that quarterback battle. I don't see him having that high of a ceiling in this Ohio State offense, but I also think he's a decent scheme fit just because of what Chip Kelly does in his offense. And I think there's a possibility of a transfer. Where I don't know, but I just in this quarterback room, which we'll get into later, I see him having a hard time finding the field. Not because he's a bad player, but just how he stacks up to the rest of the competition. Transfer portal wise, Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. Everyone knows I'm super high on that kid. I was super high on him last year. He dealt with some injuries, but I think he's going to be the main back in this offense, and Trevion Henderson's going to be a nice change of pace in terms of speed. Guy who's going to be able to hit home run plays. Caleb Downs is probably the best safety in college football right now, and he was just a freshman last year. So take that for what it's worth. But Caleb Downs is a very promising and talented player. Quarterback Julian Sayin spent about a week in Tuscaloosa before Nick Saban ends up retiring. And now Julian Sayin's going to be, he's supposedly competing for a quarterback spot between Devin Brown, Will Howard, and Julian Sayin. I think those are the 3 guys. You could throw Leakin Kindholes in there as well. I don't think Kindholes has much of a chance. But Julian Sayin, there's a lot of talk about how well he's been performing in practice. I know in the spring game, he didn't have the best performance. But, I mean, freshmen are going to make mistakes. It was the first time with a lot of spotlight on him. And he might not be the one that starts at the beginning of the season, but I can expect him to take some important snaps down the line this season. Seth McLaughlin, transfer from Alabama, the guy that couldn't snap it to Jalen Milroe. I think he's going to be a nice interior offensive lineman for Ohio State. Has some experience on a big stage, and Ohio State has a lot of offensive line problems. If you watch the spring game, granted, the Ohio State defensive line has at least three NFL guys on it, like day 2 guys or above. So in JTT, Jack Sawyer, and Tyleik Williams, probably 2 of them will be day 1. So that's definitely something to watch out for. And I think he's going to be solid. I really do. Will Howard. So this is funny, right? And I'll clip this into the episode. I said that Will Howard, I think we were talking about Kansas State, Texas. This was with Robbie. We talked about Kansas State, Texas. And I said that Will Howard was just a better version of Kyle McCord. And funny enough, Kyle McCord transfers out to arguably a lower level team, but he's probably going to find more success. And Syracuse is building something very nice with Fran Brown. And there's actually been some like good talk about Syracuse this offseason so far. And Will Howard from Kansas State transfers in. And the reason why he does is because Kansas State's going in the direction of Avery Johnson. But Will Howard transfers out of Kansas State. There's a lot of smoke about him going to USC, especially. But then they saw Miller Moss perform in the bowl game. And they also got Jaden Maeba, the UNLV kid who won Mount West Conference Freshman of the Year, who's a very good quarterback. And definitely can't wait to get to USC. But Will Howard, I don't know how much of a ceiling you have. Like, I will say this is a very Chip Kelly quarterback, a guy that's average at throwing. Like, he's not below average. He's not above average. He's just an average thrower. Like, he's going to hit his targets, but he's not going to be able to elevate your receiving game or make you that much more of a threat in the passing game. But he's a guy that can run as well. He's an average to above average runner. He's just kind of a guy that, you could use as a starter, but he's also going to be a really good depth piece if you don't have him as a starter. I don't see him going to the NFL. He has winning DNA in him. He won the Big 12 championship in 2022 when they played TCU, one of only 2 losses for TCU that season. I like him. I really do. My problem is if he was that good, first of all, he'd be in the league. And second of all, he wouldn't have to transfer out of Kansas State. Yeah. So that's my initial reading on it. Talk about some of the guys they've lost. They've lost Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord is going to obviously play at Syracuse. He was solid last year, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 66 completion percentage. If you watch him play, though, there's a lot of mistakes that could have been fixed. He didn't have an accuracy problem. He had an accuracy problem when it was throws downfield. I don't think he performed that well. I didn't think he was that good of a quarterback. That's just really how I feel. TreVeyon Henderson, their leading rusher from last season, will be back. A guy that had 10 plus touchdowns and about 6 yards per carry. He's going to be having to split carries, or I don't know how the workload's going to look for both backs. I'm assuming they'll get around the same. Maybe Quinshawn gets a little bit more, but Quinshawn's also had injury history. But hey, so is TreVeyon Henderson. And I don't know what depth they have at running back because Trip Trainum goes to Kentucky. I think Xavier Johnson's just graduated. Mayan Williams, I believe, entered the draft, did not get selected. And then Dallin Hayden's going to Colorado to be one of their running backs. So I don't know how much you do with that. At receiving, you lose your top 2 guys in terms of receptions, and Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously being the 4th overall pick, and Cade Stover went in the draft as well. You lose Julian Fleming to Penn State, but you got a lot of young and exciting receivers. But you also have Emeka Egbuka, and I think Emeka Egbuka is a solid wide receiver number 2 in the league. Like, that's kind of my reading on him. He's not going to be a star. I don't think he's going to be he might be a star this season, but I'm saying trajectory and career, he's going to be a nice receiver too in the league. Like I just see it written all over him. You got Carnell Tate, you got Jeremiah Smith, you got Brandon Inniss, you got Ballard. Like, it's actually a nice receiving room, and I'm very excited to see. You got G. Scott Jr. is probably going to be their lead tight end. He came in last year at some points. He had a couple nice catches in the spring game as well. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens with this team because I do not know. Defensively, you lose Steve Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg. You keep Tyleik Williams. You have Sonny Styles returning. You got Jack Sawyer. You have a lot of guys returning. JTT. Michael Hall Jr. went in the draft. Denzel Burke is a very, very important guy returning. This is going to be a really good Ohio State team. It really is, really is. And we'll break this down by position group. I will talk about these players, and we will start off with the wide receiver room. So, who I think are going to be important guys and X Factor guys in this wide receiver room, obviously Carnell Tate. Bryson Rogers was a nice recruit. I don't know what his playing time looks like, but I do think he's going to be impactful. Brandon Innes, yes. Jaden Ballard's going to be a guy that's going to need to get in there. Keon Grays will be worked into the workload. Jeremiah Smith and then Mecca Igbuka. This is a very good receiving room, and I think why Ohio State's starting to get the wide receiver U added to their name, because I mean, other than LSU, maybe there hasn't been that good. There hasn't been this good of a receiving room in Ohio State. That's not true. They did have Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison Jr., James. That was a stacked receiving room. But they just keep having these stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked receiving rooms. And that's why you get the title for wide receiver U. Tight ends wise, I think we will see Will Kakmerick. Kakmerick, yeah. I think it's how you say it. He's an Ohio transfer. Looks like this is going to be his last season. And then you got G. Scott Jr., who I think is just going to be a solid tight end. Is going to be able to make some nice catches. You also have Jelani Thurman as well, who is physically imposing and had a couple reps here and there last year. Like to see what he does at safety. See, this is the one where I'm just like, because I hear Sonny Styles is going to outside linebacker, right? Because Ohio State runs a 4-2-5. So Sonny Styles apparently is going to play outside linebacker. You still have Lathan Ransom, and you still have Caleb Downs to play in your back end. I mean that's a good core. Caleb Downs obviously one of the best safeties. I'm really not that high on Lathan Ransom, but I'm assuming he's going to be the guy back there. Yeah. Yeah. From what I've seen, obviously you have Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. Those are going to be your two premier backs. I don't really see it. TC Caffey had some reps in the spring game. He might get worked in here or there if one of them go down in injury. I think he's going to be the next guy up, but I think those two are just premier backs that you don't want to go up against. Yeah, I think that's how it is. All right, this quarterback room. This quarterback room's really tough to break down. And who's going to get the winning job? Because you have Will Howard. He's the guy with the most experience. He's the guy that's supposed to be the start for this team. But then you got Devin Brown, who has just had injury after injury after injury. And this is my hot take. I think he would have been the starter last year if he didn't get injured throughout the spring and then not again in the fall. He was splitting reps, which, I mean, Kyle McCord was getting most of the throwing reps, but Devin Brown was really good inside the red zone, especially as a runner. He's a hard fought, and he knows how to fight. He's a fighter. And I think that I really like Devin Brown. I'm really high on this kid. I loved his high school tape when he was transferring into, or not transferring in, enrolling into Ohio State. And I just want to see this kid succeed. And I really wish he would have entered the spring portal just to see, what else is out there for him. Because he could go be the quarterback at like TCU, like a team that like needs a quarterback to elevate. Heck, he probably could have gone to USC, been their quarterback. Could have gone to Michigan and probably been their quarterback. Although Alex Orji, I do want to see on the field this season. Maybe not that he's not the best. I know Zach Warren's also a very good quarterback, or performed very well in the spring game, and probably has generated a lot of buzz around his name. God, who else? I'm just trying to think of teams. I mean, not Wisconsin. They got TVD. Minnesota could have, even though I love Max Bronzer. Yeah, Devin Brown could have gone somewhere and, really displayed his talents. But he's trying to be a leader in this locker room as well. And who knows? Maybe he does get the starting job. This is very tight. There's three quarterbacks really competing for it. Will Howard, Aaron Noland. My problem with Aaron Noland is I don't think he's that good of a thrower. And I mean, I think out of everyone, he's the least likely to start that's actually in this competition. But he's a very good runner. there's a lot of upside. I think there is a chance that he might not even be a quarterback and he can be a wide receiver because he's got really good speed. He's really good in the open field too, but we'll see. I He's a lefty. I don't know. I don't really trust him. Julian Sand, this kid, I like his film. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of buzz around his name. I don't know. Like, do you want to take the chance on a freshman being in there? He's very talented. I think he's got the best arm out of everyone probably in this quarterback room in terms of pure throwing talent. Maybe with Devin Brown. Lincoln Kindhole is the one guy that I just don't see a future at for Ohio State. He's already a sophomore. I don't think he's that good. Um, and you might disagree with me, but I just think he's very raw and he's not going to get the reps in practice to really get developed. He's going to be a guy that's going to set 3 or 4, and maybe he's okay with that. Maybe he gets a shot in like his last year, but I'll tell you, Tavian St. Clair, is it St. Clair or St. Brown? I forget. I think it's St. Clair. Their top recruit in the 2025 class. That kid's a stud. That kid is really, really good. And yeah, to be honest, other than Julian saying, I don't see anyone starting over him. He's legit. Some guys returning on the offensive line, obviously Donovan Jackson. You get good guys in the recruiting class in the Armstrong brothers. I'm just trying to see. I'm not the biggest Anak Fahmy. I know he's a guy that's projected to get drafted next year. I'm just looking. Seth McLaughlin transfers in. I'm not the one to ask about offensive linemen. Okay, guys. What I do know is as the group collectively is not the greatest. And I watched them play in the spring game and they had trouble, but I also give them the benefit of the doubt because I don't see a lot of people blocking the Ohio State defensive line this upcoming season. At linebacker next year, wow. CJ Hicks has to be one of the guys. CJ Hicks is, and this might be the position they're maybe not the weakest at, but they run a 4-2-5 with the Jim Knowles, and apparently Sonny Styles is going to be the second linebacker. So I'm just trying to take a look. Joey Vasquez, Alec De Senor, Jalen Pace. Yeah, I'm seeing some of these names, and I'm thinking has to be CJ Hicks, right? I love CJ Hicks. I think he's a stud. He's a 5-star coming out of high school, early enrollee too. So this would technically, if he stuck to his actual like legit class, he would have been a sophomore this season. So, but I think CJ Hicks is a stud. He's going to be able to do a lot for this team. And I really hope he gets his opportunity because I am a huge fan of CJ Hicks, which you should know because I mentioned his name last year. I mentioned his name throughout the season. I wish he would have played more last year, but hey, man, it is what it is. Defensive tackle, Tyleik Williams will obviously be the number 1 guy. Number 2 guy, I could not tell you. Yeah, I don't really have a good read on this situation because, I mean, there's only 40 tackles listed. Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams, Hero Canoe, and Tywone Malone. I know Tyleik was a stud last year, man. He was a big him and Michael Hall were a big reason that Michigan-Ohio State game was so competitive. Yeah, I'd have to say it's Tywone Malone. It's the only one that got playing time last year because Jade McKenzie's not returning. Yeah, I think it would have to be him. Which I mean, he's a 6'4", 301-pound guy. I don't have a great read on what he looks like. That's something I'm gonna have to see throughout the season. He could be good. He could be really good. The defensive ends obviously are gonna be Jack Sawyer and what's his nuts? JT Tumalau. I can't believe I just said what's his nuts. But yeah, these two obviously are superstar edge rushers. Both can be very impactful, very good at getting to the quarterback. Very lengthy guys, very technically sound guys. JT does get like blocked up a little bit here and there. I think Jack Sawyer's actually probably the better defensive end, but I think JT also has the higher ceiling. So both really good players. There's nothing much else to be said about that. Quarterback room. So obviously we know number one guy is going to be Denzel Burke. Number two guy, it was Davian Inglebuson. Oh, God, I can't say that last name. He was good last year. I think they could go Aaron Scott, even though he's just a freshman. I think he could be involved in there. Jordan Hancock was their nickel guy last year. I think he's got the potential to be really good. Could see some Jermaine Matthews Jr. in there as well. I think all these guys are pretty good, relatively, relatively good. And yeah, well, we just went through every single position group. Just notable hires, obviously Chip Kelly before it was Bill O'Brien, and then yeah, that's all I really have to say about their staff. Obviously, Ryan Day, he's a very nice offensive mind. I don't know what it looks like, how this looks like for him, how much Chip Kelly influence there's going to be. Their first play in the spring game was a traditional power T offensive play. Jim Knowles, I really like Jim Knowles. I loved him at Oklahoma State. I know the first year under him, it was kind of like, just breaking the shoes in almost, or breaking your mid in. When you buy a new mitt or get some new shoes, you got to break them in a little bit, right? But I think he's starting to put a really good defensive system together. I mean, he's got a lot of studs to make plays for him. All right, let's take a look at Ohio State's schedule next year. As I itch the side of my head. All right, so you start off at home versus Akron, home versus Western Michigan, home versus Marshall. You start out 3-0 and out of conference play. You probably take Michigan State at East Lansing, and you probably take Iowa at home. You got a relatively easy first 5 games. As long as you take care of business and don't mess around, you got an easy first 5 games. Hurts me to say that as a Michigan State fan, but I'm not delusional like a lot of people that you see on Twitter. I actually watch football and watch these, and I think Michigan State's still going to have a good season. Don't get me wrong. I don't see them really competing with Ohio State. Oregon's going to be really tough for them. I think last time they played Oregon, they lost, and that was that CJ Stroud's first season starting. It's the first game of the season. It'll be nice to see. I don't know. I'll have to make that call when it gets to Saturday, October 12th. You have a bye week. You go into at home versus Nebraska. I think you should take care of business there, although Nebraska's going to be a team to watch, especially in the Big Ten this season, making a late push and as a dark horse playoff team. At Penn State, wow, Penn State's going to be very good. I think you actually have a good chance. I'm not on high on Penn State this year. Should win against Purdue, should win against Northwestern at Northwestern's practice field, which if you didn't know, that's happening. So Ryan Field is, I believe, being torn down and being redone for construction. So they're going to be playing on Northwestern's practice field, which I don't know what the capacity is going to be for those games. And Northwestern was actually really good under David Braun last year, the interim that actually get hired as the head coach. And so they're Evanston, Illinois is where Northwestern is located. And Northwestern's going to be playing on if you haven't seen pictures of their practice facilities and what it looks like, my God, it's gorgeous. I want to go there someday. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll be able to do the Engage 8 road tour or something like that. I don't know. Well, just an idea. Maybe one day. But no, Northwestern is going to be playing on their practice field. So it'll be interesting to see Ohio State versus Northwestern. Indiana should be a win. And obviously Michigan. I mean, you've lost 3 in a row to Michigan. I think this is probably I want to say this is going to be the worst Michigan team they faced, but I think it's not as good as the last 2 years for sure. I don't think it's as good as the last 2 years teams, but at the same time, the defense is still amazing, and I will probably get to Michigan very soon just because of the reigning national championship or reign. Can't believe I butchered that. Reigning national champions, but yeah. All right. That's the end. I don't really have much else to say. If you did like this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. And let me know your thoughts on how you think Ohio State's going to do this season. If you have any ideas for me to do for our next team, let me know. I'm always open to suggestions. Happy to go through all of these things for you guys. And yeah, I think Ohio State, they will be let's give a prediction. Record prediction. I think they go 11-1. I think that's what I'm going to say because I see them dropping a game either to Michigan, Penn State, or Oregon. I think Oregon's actually the most likely out of all of them. To be honest, I really like Oregon's team next year. But yeah. All right. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and share. Comment what team I should do next, and we will see you in the near future.